people. I am starting Chapter 2. We've already finished all the information for Chapter 1. I'm starting on Chapter 2. Now the good news is this is material for the most part, or at least partly, that we've covered last year. So let's see how much you guys remember. Now this is a little different, but one of the big things last year we talked about were chemical reactions. Okay, so I'm about to draw a chemical reaction up on the board. And if you remember from last year, a chemical reaction is a reaction where you're going to create new substances. New substances are produced. Okay? Remember that your reactants are to the left of the arrow. Those are like your ingredients. These are your reactants. I have 2 of them. I'm going to end up having 3 products. So reactants and products. Does anybody know what this thing is? It's kind of a big molecule. I'll get to that in a minute. Understand that this is one molecule. I know it's one molecule. And each of the molecules has, or each molecule has 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen, and they're all connected by a bond. One molecule. Okay? Big molecule. That's, by the way, that's sugar. It's a molecule of sugar. Weird. O2, oxygen. Okay. So I'm going to have a chemical. By the way, I'll give you a hint. Does anybody have any idea what this is? It's going on inside every one of your cells in your body right now. The reason I'm bringing it up. Many living organisms, not all, but many cells inside living organisms will do this chemical reaction. Come on, guys, it's inside of you. Every little cell in your body is doing this. Let me give you another hint. Cells in your body are doing this, and then they're going to create waste products. Okay, hold on. No. They're going to create waste products. No. That you're going to eventually breathe out. What do we breathe out?
Carbon dioxide.
We don't breathe out oxygen. Carbon dioxide. What else do we breathe out?
Steam.
What's steam? The whole point of this chemical reaction is to make energy. Now I'm going to write the word ATP up here. I realize you don't know what that means just yet, but ATP is basically the form that energy takes inside of the cell. You'll learn more about that a little later. So, okay, let's look at this overall. Again, this chapter is more or less on chemistry, a lot of stuff you learned last year. You know this is a chemical reaction because you have certain reactions that are going to produce new substances. But look closely. You'll notice that I have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen on the left. I have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen on the right. I don't want to violate that law of conservation of mass. I can't make any new atoms on the other side. It's still the same atoms, they're just rearranged. By the way, nobody has any idea what this is called? This process is called cell respiration. Okay. Do not confuse cell respiration with breathing respiration. They're different. This is what's going on inside the cells of living organisms, in the cells themselves. Okay? Breathing is just a way to bring in the oxygen and get out the carbon dioxide. It doesn't actually do this. So it's different. Okay, I'd ask you guys to balance it. I think that would be a good activity to do.
No.
But I will balance it for you.
Thank you.
Remember last year we talked about balancing equations. The whole point of balancing equations, whether you were good at it or not, was to make sure you had the same number of atoms on each side of the equation.
Put a 6 in front of the
Yeah,
side.
look at that. There's 6 carbons on the left-hand side of the equation, but I only have 1 on the other side.
6. I
Yep.
got that one.
In fact,
right.
I'm going to balance it for you real quick. It's the evil way to balance. If you added up all the carbons on the left side, you'd have 6. Same over there. If you added up all the hydrogens on the left side, they would equal the number of hydrogens on the right. And if you did the same with oxygen, it'd be the same on that side. That's the whole point of balancing equation. Okay, you do need to kind of remember that. What else am I forgetting? That's it for now. Okay, so we remembered the basics of a chemical reaction. Let's just keep moving forward. You guys should know. You'll need to know the 3 parts of an atom. Proton, neutron, and electron.
That's right. Come on, Tyler.
You guys should remember the charge and location of each of these particles. Protons are positives, neutrons are neutral, electrons are negative. Protons and neutrons are found inside the center of an atom. Electrons are the particles that are on the outside and circle around really fast. You guys should also know how to draw a picture of an atom. In particular, in the world of biology, you are concerned about the carbon atom. Carbon is number 6 on the periodic table. I want you guys to draw me a picture of a carbon atom that follows this format. Show me where those protons are, show me where those neutrons are, and show me where those electrons are at.
The outer one holds.
Hold on, just give everybody a minute. I want to see if you guys can draw me a carbon atom. You did this a billion times last year. Like I said, biologists are really concerned about the carbon atom. All right, carbon, number 6. Those 6 protons are going to be inside the center. The neutrons will also, but I'm going to put a question mark as to the number of neutrons because I didn't give you that information here. The electrons. How many electrons will fit on the inside energy level?
2.
Very good. And how many will fit on the second energy level?
4.
Well, carbon only has 4 to give, so I'll go with you on that. Okay, good.
Wait, is it like 6 or something?
It'll hold up to 8.
8.
Remember that second energy level will hold up to 8, but carbon doesn't have 8, it only has 4 more. Guys, this is important. By drawing the picture of a carbon atom, it can tell you a lot of things. How many times will carbon be able, how many other atoms will carbon be able to bond to?
4.
How do you know that? 4 is the answer, by the way.
Still 4 left on
There's still 4. Very good. Carbon has the ability to form up to 4 bonds with other atoms. That's probably your simplest carbon compound. That's methane. Okay? Good. Carbon also has another really cool quality about it. Carbon can form double bonds with itself. Carbon can form triple bonds with itself. That's pretty unique. Okay, here's my point. Carbon has the ability to form so many different types of molecules. Living organisms on the planet Earth are carbon-based life forms. You might have heard of that before. Living organisms are carbon-based life forms. Because carbon can form a diverse number of molecules that make up living organisms, which we'll talk about later in this chapter. Also, carbon's a pretty stable atom. Okay, it's basically, you know, especially when you start talking about double and triple bonds, that's a whole lot of stability. And I don't know about you, but I sure want my molecules to be pretty stable that make me up. So, carbon's very unique. So, yes, sirree. Questions on any of that? That should be very, very, very much a review from last year. Let's keep going unless there's questions. Is this stuff all coming back to you guys? Sort of, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this word. Let's see what you remember. By the way, this is in Chapter 2, so don't think this information is not in your biology book. I'm not just trying to punish you with talking chemistry. Okay. Isotope. This is important in the world of biology. Let's talk about isotopes of carbon, since carbon is, you know. These should look kind of familiar when you have something written out this way. Nope. These are all examples of carbon atoms. All of these atoms have something in common. Well, they're all carbon. And being that they're all carbon, they are all going to have the same proton number inside the atom, which is going to be 6. Okay? Remember last year, this is important to remember, proton number is like a nickname. It's like an identity. The fact that I said this atom has 6 protons automatically tells you that this is a carbon atom. If I would say I have an atom that has 8 protons, you would automatically know that I'm talking about an oxygen atom. I'm getting this information right off the periodic table. Oxygen's at number 8. If I would say I have an atom that has 3 protons, which one would I be talking about? 3. Lithium. Good. So proton numbers like naming it. Okay, what does vary among these 3 atoms is not the proton number, but it's the neutron number. Okay? Remember, these numbers are mass numbers. Only protons and neutrons have mass. Electrons don't count. They're pretty much massless. So this number is going to be a combination of these 2 things. So I automatically know that this particular atom has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, because 6 plus 6 is 12. Electrons don't count. How many neutrons over here? How many neutrons over here? Good. These are isotopes of carbon. They're all atoms of the same element, carbon, but they differ in their number of neutrons. That's what makes them isotopes. They differ in their number of neutrons, which makes them a completely different atom. Completely different atoms behave differently. Here's how it's important. Carbon-12 is a non-radioactive form. That thing's stable and happy. C14 is radioactive. We remember that word from last year. If an atom is radioactive, remember that means that the protons and neutrons that are on the inside of the atom don't like to stay glued together. These protons and neutrons kind of like to break apart. That's called decay. When the protons and neutrons don't like to stay glued together, these atoms decay. When they decay, they not only release the protons and neutrons, but they release a lot of energy along the way, and a lot of times that energy is really bad. It goes on to do bad things like cause cancer. Okay. Then remember some other words. Remember the word half-life real quickly. When radioactive atoms decay, they actually do something kind of amazing. They decay at a steady rate. That's important. That's why you guys were able to do all those math problems last year that had to do with half-life. If you have a certain amount of radioactive substance, after how many days will you'll have how much radioactive substance left. You guys did a bunch of half-life problems last year. And the only reason you were able to do those radioactive half-life problems was because when an atom decays, it decays at a steady rate. Well, this is useful to scientists to date things. A lot of times, old living things, like we're talking like mummies and like really, really old organisms that they find fossil remains for. Well, they can figure out the date of those things by using radioactive carbon dating. They call it carbon dating. All right, here's what happens. This is kind of cool. When a living organism is living, I don't care if it's a human or a plant or a bacteria, whatever it is, when a living organism is alive and living, they are absorbing, whether it's through food or whatever, a lot of C12, which is non-radioactive, But to be honest, living organisms are also taking in quite a lot of, not a lot as much, but they're also taking in some radioactive stuff as well. They're also taking in C14. Okay. So when I'm alive and well, I'm absorbing C12 and C14 throughout my life. Yada, 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 whether I'm eating it, breathing it, whatever, okay. When living organisms die, kick the bucket. Done. Obviously, they're really not doing anything anymore. They're definitely not absorbing anything anymore. Okay, so what's going to end up happening is you'll have a dead organism who's not absorbing anything anymore, but this C14 is now changing inside of them. The C12 levels will stay the same, but the C14 levels, that C14 is going to start decaying. Well, what scientists do is they take a ratio. They can determine if they take a sample of a dead living organism, how long it's been since they died, based on how much of that C14 is left behind. It's really kind of actually a rather simple concept. So that's C14 dating. That's how they date living organisms, based on the fact that radioactive substances decay to cigarette. Pretty cool? All right. And it's also there to remind you guys what radioactive substances are. Okay, I'm plugging along because... Questions? Is this at all ringing a bell with you guys from last year? Raise your hand if you're like, oh yeah. Okay, raise your hand if you're like, oh, I probably should have paid attention last year a little better. Raise your hand if you're like, this stuff's boring me because I already knew it. Okay. I like it. That's what I want to know. All right, then I will plug along.
I raised my hand for all three.
Hey, remember, this is an example of a compound. What is it?
Salt.
All right.
Boom.
Salt. NaCl. Just remember that the elements that make up a compound can be drastically different than the compound itself. Sodium, by itself, elemental sodium, if I had it all by itself, is like, it looks like silver silly putty. It's a metal, because everything on the left side of the periodic table is a metal element, so sodium's over there, it's metal. So it's shiny, it's silvery, and boy is it reactive and nasty. I wouldn't want to have sodium metal in my hand, because that sodium would react with the water on my skin and like blow up in my hand, okay? That wouldn't make for a good day. So, sodium, reactive. Chlorine. Chlorine gas is the same stuff they used to kill people in the war, like warfare kind of deal.
Sweet.
So chlorine gas, very deadly stuff. But you put them together and you eat it every day. Crazy, huh? So remember that. Moving along.
So you have to write that down?
You have to write down you should be writing down more than what I write down.
How is that even possible?
By listening and writing down the important things I say.
Like I said, how is that even possible?
All right. You remember the different type of bonds we talked about last year. I'm going to add one that we didn't talk about last year. This one on the end. Okay, I'm not going to go into much detail. You need to already know this. Ionic bonds, well, NaCl is an example of a compound that's connected by an ionic bond because you have a metal and a non-metal element hooking up. Classic ionic bond. Covalent bonds form between a non-metal element and another non-metal element. Carbon is non-metal, oxygen is non-metal. They're hooking up, covalent bond. Metallic form between two metal elements like aluminum. Okay, hydrogen. I'll be honest, a hydrogen bond, obviously you're going to have a hydrogen atom involved. That's pretty much kind of what it is. Let me tell you why it matters in biology. I just drew a water molecule there, H2O. One water molecule is going to form a bond with another water molecule. That bond that forms between two separate water molecules is the hydrogen bond. Wow, and is this hydrogen bond cool? The hydrogen bonds that form between water molecules actually allow water to be as cool as it is. Not cool as in like temperature cool, as in like awesome. It can do so many cool things. It's kind of leading me to my flower kind of demo up there. I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to kind of clarify something. Within the water molecule itself, so these bonds right here that are actually holding one water molecule together, those are not where the hydrogen bonds are. You can tell me what kind of bond forms to hold the water molecule itself together. I'll give you a hint. It's one of the ones over there. It's a covalent bond. Remember? Non-metal, non-metal. Good. So here's my point. Don't confuse these two bonds. You actually have two different kind of bonds working here. You have covalent bonds holding the water molecules together, individual water molecule together, and you have hydrogen bonds that are connecting one water molecule to another. That's important. Okay. Questions? I think I'm going to move to the overhead for the remainder. Okay, so here's my point. These hydrogen bonds, like I said, are responsible for doing really, 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 really cool things. Here's before I get to the cool things, let's talk about another couple of cool words you need to know about. A couple of terms. These are actually vocab words, I believe. Cohesion and adhesion. Those apply to the hydrogen bonds. Go ahead and jot that down real quick and I'll explain. Cohesion is the attraction of molecules of the same substance. For example, water and water hooking up. You guys know when you wax your car and then you put water on it, all the water molecules are going to bead up. Okay, well, the water molecules that make up that bead of water are basically attracted to each other by cohesion. They're all hooking up with themselves. Okay, adhesion, on the other hand, is the attraction of molecules of different substances. In other words, water not only will hook up with itself at times, it'll actually hook up to other compounds, other things, other substances. These flowers up here. This is cool. Obviously, we haven't done your guys' class yet. What's going to happen to these flowers tomorrow? They're all going to be hopefully different colors. Okay, hopefully. We'll see how dead these flowers were when I bought them to see how well they're going to be able to move water through them. Hopefully you guys understand, water, this is cool. Water is actually going to be moving from down there up through the plant. I don't think you realize how kind of cool that is. Remember last year we talked about the word gravity. Usually things like to move towards the center of mass. Usually water's going to want to move down towards the center of mass. Center of mass meaning like center of the earth, so things are going to fall to the center of the earth, including water. Anyway, because of cohesion and adhesion, those water molecules are going to hook onto themselves. They're going to hook onto the sides of the plant and make their way up through the plant. That's just cool. Okay, we got to set one up for you guys, though. We have yellow this one.
Yeah, red, blue.
Yeah, they're all taken, so we'll see if your guys' works.
Ours will work because we're a legit class.
All right. So, this should be interesting. So here's what, this would make for a great test question, guys. How does water move up through a plant? And this is where you would bring out those fancy schmancy words and say, due to a combination of cohesion and adhesion. Water molecules not only have a chance to hook onto themselves, but they hook onto other things, and that's what's going to make water move against gravity, basically, in this case. It's pretty cool. Hey, another example of adhesion. I actually even wrote it down, I just didn't show you yet. Do you remember that word meniscus? When we were in the lab last year and we were measuring liquids out in a graduated cylinder, there was a correct way and an incorrect way to read a graduated cylinder. When you put water in a graduated cylinder, it actually makes a smile. You kind of have to look closely, but the water doesn't actually form this flat layer right here. It forms kind of like a little smile. That smile is called a meniscus. The correct way to read the graduated cylinder would be to make the measurement, to take the measurement where the smile is at the lowest point, so at the bottom of the smile. So if I was taking this measurement, if that smile was the meniscus, basically I would have 50 milliliters of water versus the 51. That's just kind of a good lab technique. Yeah?
I thought meniscus was something or knee.
Different. That's true.
Wrong class.
No, it's the same class, but same word, different meaning. It's one of those words. What are those called in English? Oh, there you go. There you go.
Oh, go for the English teacher.
I like it. Okay, a couple more words, guys.
She's talking about it.
Oh, no, I actually have another overhead, so don't get too comfortable.
Oh,
this is all good. I know deep down inside you guys love learning.
I do. Yeah. Makes my day.
This is kind of dry stuff, but this is actually really important. Okay, there's another word called specific heat that deals with water. This conversation is all about water. Specific heat, the amount of energy needed to change the temperature of a substance. Believe it or not, I talked about this last year, guys. I want you guys to understand, water has a really high specific heat. Okay, it's a fancy word, but it means this. Water has a very high specific heat. Well, let's put it this way. If water didn't have a high specific heat, I really doubt there would be any life forms around on planet Earth. Okay, here's why. Last year, this is the example I used. I had a picture of a swimming pool with like a deck surrounding it, and I was comparing that swimming pool and with the deck around it in the daytime versus the nighttime. Well, you guys know this. You were just in summer. If you, let's say it's around 1 in the afternoon on one of those 100-degree days we have, and you went to this pool and it had a deck, or actually technically could even be concrete, like maybe we were at the pool or something. I know I went to the Delta School a couple times with my kids. Okay. The pavement, hot, okay? It's not going to take a whole lot of energy from the sun to heat up that concrete. It didn't take very long, what, maybe an hour or two? But it got real hot. The water in the pool, on the other hand, the water has a real high specific heat value, meaning it's going to take a lot of energy to heat that water to change temperature. In other words, the water in the pool from day to night, to be honest, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't change temperature all that much. But the concrete or the deck does fluctuate in temperature drastically of the day versus the night. Now, I realize pool water changes, but compare it. Yeah, Jeremy.
Isn't that why people get like exhausted while they're swimming because it's trying to take their body heat or energy and stuff?
No, that would probably be more because of muscle cell usage and not being able to keep up on the energy demands while you're swimming. But good thinking. Could be at both. No, good thinking. So remember that. Well, here's where it applies to biology. This would be a good test question, by the way, too. Imagine water had a low specific heat value. What would that mean for life in the ocean?
That it died.
Why?
Because the water would be hot.
Because it'd be unstable.
No, it wouldn't be because the water's hot, but I think I heard the answer. Josh, did you say it? Who said it? What'd you say? You didn't say it. Who said it? It was okay, it was Grant.
Very unstable.
Correct. What would happen if water had a low specific heat value that would mean that it would just change temperature all the time. It would not be stable. I'm sorry, but if I was a little fishy swimming in the ocean and the water around me was changing temperature from hot to cold to hot to cold all the time, my little fish body would have a tough time keeping up with those changes.
What if you big shark?
Okay, yeah. So that fit, the life in the ocean would have to have some serious adaptations to itself to be able to withstand those drastic temperatures from day to night or whatever it is. But water doesn't, that's not how water is. Water is wonderful. Water has this ability to kind of maintain a pretty constant temperature because of its high specific heat value, because it's going to take a ton of energy inputted to change its temperature even a little bit. So that's important. Okay, this is kind of a side note. You guys have to remember the two parts of a solution, a solute and a solvent. The reason we bring this up now is because water is considered the universal solvent, okay? Because lots of stuff dissolves in it. Last one, I swear. Let's see, what else are you guys going to do?
Sleep.
Sit around and talk about who's going to homecoming? See, that's boring.
No.
It's really fun.
Oh.
I do.
You guys go this year.
I know you should.
All right, what did I start? All right, guys. Another word. I drew a water molecule there. Get used to it. I really want you to understand a lot about the water molecule. And I drew, let me kind of make this a little more clear if it's not. I have a water molecule there. Already losing my pens, my transparency pens. That's not good. There's no reason it's in blue, I just can't find my black marker. Okay, the oxygen atom that makes up a water molecule tends to take on a slightly negative charge. The hydrogen atoms that make up a water molecule tend to take up a little slightly positive charge. That is what makes water a polar molecule. Polar molecule has nothing to do with hot or cold. A polar molecule is called a polar molecule because it means that these electrons, remember the electrons are on the outside of an atom, are not evenly distributed throughout this molecule. So in the water molecule's case, electrons tend to kind of cling a little closer to the oxygen than to the hydrogen. And remember, oxygens have a negative charge, so of course oxygen is going to take on a slightly negative charge. Okay. By the way, the fact that water is a polar molecule is the reason it can form hydrogen bonds with itself and other molecules. It basically is another reason that makes water so special. All right. Remember your pH scale from last year? 0 to 14, 7 in the middle. The lower pH numbers are your acids. The higher pH values are your bases. Remember, when I see a little H plus ion, that should indicate to you that you have an acid. I'll give you an example in a minute. When you see OH negative ions floating around in solution, that should indicate to you that you have a base. Here is an example. This looks a little messy, but it's easy. If I take HCl and I break it apart into its ions, it'll form H plus and Cl negative. Well, look at that. I underlined it. That's how important it is. That H plus ion tells me that my original substance here, HCl, is an acid. That is, it's hydrochloric acid. All right, over here. NaOH, if I take it and break it apart into its ion, it's going to form Na plus OH negative. Ooh, underlined it. That OH negative tells me this sucker right here is a base. Sodium hydroxide is what that is. By the way, sodium hydroxide is pretty nasty. Don't think that just acids are bad. If I had NaOH and I put it on my skin, it would burn right through it. This is a new word and I'm done. Buffers. substances that prevent sudden changes in pH. Okay, now we're talking living organisms, biology kind of thing. Remember that word homeostasis and the fact that organisms have to kind of maintain a constant internal environment? Well, we better come up with ways to maintain a constant internal environment, and that includes pH values. As an example, blood, so I guess I am talking about pretty much the animal kingdom, those with blood. The blood has to have a pH of 7.4, a little bit basic, believe it or not. Our blood's a little basic. We better have substances in our blood to make sure that our blood stays 7.4. That's important. You don't need to write this down. My advanced kids had to know this, but I want you to look at it. Buffers are like sponges. This stuff's in our blood. If our blood gets too basic, if the pH goes to like 10 or 11, which it won't, basically this reaction down here is going to push to the right. Because if this reaction goes to the right, it's going to make more of these guys right here. And that'll make my blood acidic. So if my blood's too basic, this reaction will go to the right and make those hydrogen ions, bring the pH of my blood back to where it needs to be. You have a buffering system in your stomach as well. Although you don't want your stomach to be a pH of 7.4. What do you think the pH of your stomach is? 1 or 2? Yeah. So you have a different buffering system in your stomach to make sure that your stomach stays at a pH of 2. You're going to want a lot of hydrogen ions floating around in your stomach. All right, a lot of information. Questions? Here, let's look at some pictures. Just showing a nice little cute water molecule. I like this picture down here because it shows you where the hydrogen bonds form between water molecules. Again, it's between the molecules themselves, not within them. This is kind of cool. I didn't talk about surface tension, but that's another quality of water, like cohesion and adhesion, that make water so special. The surface of water, actually, it's almost like the surface of water, you can imagine, has like a little piece of saran wrap on it. It doesn't, but it kind of acts like it. And that's why some organisms can kind of float on it. Kind of neat. And then be sure you remember this scale. pH very much applies to the biological world. Very much applies to the biological world, believe it or not. For reasons I kind of already talked about. But it's amazing. Inside living organisms is pretty complex. All right, guys. On until tomorrow.
Cheers.
No.